Hi, folks. Sitting here with Outer Circle after a long ass conversation. Well, we should have started this ages ago, but it's what it is. What are you drinking, by the way? What did you go and get?
Uh, Actually, I'm just drinking a Pepsi Max. Normally, I would be drinking a Scotch, but it is a school night, so
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm actually also drinking
be
Pepsi
sober for
Max.
the kids.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be a sobering conversation, to be fair. So I actually am quite happy that I did the four. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a little conversation about where we think the law's perhaps veering off the tracks in terms of 40k. I've done a few Horus Heresy ones, mainly because OC knows a lot more about Horus Heresy than I do, so it'd be good to bounce a few things off of his noggin as we go through it as well. I think we're going to jump back and forth, aren't we? So, and if we get the same one, we'll talk about it. But these are generally things that we both think are hugely detrimental to the law going forward and can kind of, I think the phrase you used the other day in our messages was, cause it to buckle under its own weight, the creak. Because you just did a video on bloat, which is very, very good, and I advise people go and watch it. I'll link it in the description down below. So these are things that can cause the lore of Warhammer 40,000 and Horus Heresy, from my point of view, to actually buckle and break under its own strain. You agree with that? You good with that?
I think I'm good with that.
Excellent.
I do thank you as well for praising the video, which I think was actually itself a bit of a bloated, rambling mess. But I'll take the win. I'll take the compliment. Thank you.
To be fair, that's the whole point. It's a ludo-narrative harmony and all that sort of stuff.
It was a meta commentary.
Meta commentary, exactly. All right, I'm gonna jump in with a Horus Heresy one, if you don't mind. I'm just gonna read it straight off the top. So, useless characters doing useless things, and what I mean by that is, and this is completely selfish on my point of view. This is and this is all opinions, by the way, folks. So please don't be jumping down our throats and bombing our channels, whatever. I don't care about the Pharos, or anything Vulcan does, at all, or the Cabal, or Imperium Secundus. The only things that should be covered in the mainline Horus Heresy series are the rise of Horus, his eventual corruption, the two Istvans, Dropsite Massacre, as well, Calth, Sigma Prime, Horus getting supercharged by Chaos, along with the muster of the Chaos Legions, and the Siege of Terror. Everything else, literally everything else, should either be in a spin-off novel that is optional to read, you don't need to read to get the full context of the Horus Heresy, or a Primarch novel. With the Horus Heresy, I have absolutely no idea where to jump in for what legion and when. The Dark Angels and Night Lords are perhaps the main drawbacks of this approach. They are literally lost in the shuffle for the sake of following boring side plots. Who cares about attempting to assassinate Horus, as in that novel, you know what I mean, with the Vindicator on the front of it, when they know they don't succeed, for instance. You know what I mean? We know Horus is not going to die. Why are we writing a novel called Nemesis, all about going to assassinate Horus? Would you agree with that? Because that's one of the more controversial ones that I came up with, where I was like, that might not get a lot of traction, but it's just something that every now and again, I'm sitting in bed. I'm like, do you know what? I wanna listen to a Horus Heresy book as I'm just chilling out on the evening. Do you know what? I'm in a White Scars mood. Where do I start? But actually, no. White Scars is a bad example because Chris Raitt did an amazing job. But like, say Dark Angels, for example. All right, you start with the Angels of Caliban or whatever. But then that starts way before the Horus Heresy, so you're already out of whack. And then the Thramos Crusade is the main meat of what the Dark Angels do against the Night Lords. What book's that in? I don't know.
It isn't. It isn't.
Exactly, but it's one of the main things. They cut the way that some of the things that should be in this. My brain's already melting on my first one.
Okay, so it's interesting you say that because I've said something very similar myself. I feel like the narrative should have been a straight line from Corruption of Horus through to Siege of Terror, and then you have supplemental books to the story. So think about like your Star Wars, right? Your original 3 films, the original trilogy, and then you had all the novel series, the spin-off novels, the expanded universe. That's what I felt they should have done. A lot of people said, but who cares? Like, it's world building, it's world building. No. World building is not having a bajillion novels. World building can be effectively done in a single novel if you do it right. The problem is, it's like they took something like The Lord of the Rings, and you get your Fellowship of the Ring, and then all of a sudden they're like, now here's the Silmarillion, now here's the Hobbit, now here's a whole bunch of the different appendices, now the Two Towers. Now some more appendices. Here's the Book of Lost Tales. Now the Return of the King.
Yeah.
And you stray so far off, and it's not the Horus heresy. It's events that happen concurrently within the Horus heresy is probably the best way to define the novel series.
Yeah, I think that the biggest symptom of bloat was I love Legion as a book for the Alpha Legion. I think it's a really good way of introducing what the Alpha Legion are. It's just I've heard it described as the book that broke the Horus heresy. Like, that was it. After that, the floodgates were open because we got the Cabal in there. Got all of this nonsense going on with everybody in the Horus heresy, and where does it end? And I think you talked about it in the bloat video as well, in that, you know, it's a complete fallacy of meaning when we have a story that is essentially an A, B, C, D, and E, and, you know, from Horus being corrupted to the Siege of Terra, spinning off in all these different directions, and at the end of the day, unless you're a super fan, there's a very good reason why Horus Heresy has millions of fans worldwide, and these books don't break 100,000 sales. There's a very good reason for that, because nobody knows where the fuck to start, apart from the first three, which, by the way, were some of the best-selling books in the entire series. I think they were the best-selling books in the entire series, because they're a trilogy. You know what's going to happen. I think the only success story of the Horus Heresy for me was Horus Rising, False Gods, and Galaxy in Flames, because that's the story of the Horus Heresy for me. That's just, there you go. You can go from there to see the Terra if you want.
There's a few other good ones in there, and I did a shortlist for it, and I think I came with maybe 8 or 10 books total. For the entire Horus Heresy. I'm like, look, if you really want to, you know, read these 10, and you'll be fine. There are 2 books that come to mind, though. Like, obviously, I fully agree on Legion. I think when we did our video, I said Legion is definitely the point of, you know, that was
point of no return,
where the birds flew into the turbine on the jetliner.
Yeah.
But Sons of Selenar and Lehman Russ one where he goes to fight Horus.
Wolfbane or something?
Yes, Wolfbane, that's the one. I was going to say Wolf Time, but I'm like, no, that's his meant to be when he comes back.
Yeah.
Sons of Selenar for introducing Primaris Gene Seed into the Horus Heresy. And Sons of Selenar, and Wolfsbane for introducing Belisarius Call into the Horus Heresy. Neither of which affects the Horus Heresy.
No.
So why are they there? Yeah. Like, that's that pointless world building. Like, that's that Legolas rocking up in the Hobbit films as a wink to the audience.
Well, again, like, we're not saying, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to speak for you, but we're not saying I don't think that world building's wrong. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that the mainline series, there's a very good reason why you have the mainline Avenger films and all the spin-off films around that. But you don't need to watch The Incredible Hulk to watch The Avengers. You don't need to watch Black Widow to watch Endgame, right? There's a very good sense in the Horus Heresy that you need to read every book to get the full context of what's going on, because we're seeing it with the Siege of Terra books. There are characters turning up in Siege of Terra. I have no effing idea who these people are, or why they're important. And when they die, I'm thinking, should I have been emotional there? Because I don't know who this person is, you know? There's a very good sense. And I think bloat isn't so much of a big problem if you don't make it mandatory. But I get the big sense that it is mandatory.
You need to clearly define the parameters.
Yeah.
You need to clearly define the parameters. Like, the Primarchs novel series works better than the Horus Heresy mainline, because it's exactly that. It's called the Primarchs. Each one is about a Primarch. It's a separate thing.
Yeah.
Great. Works. That's what they should have done. Like, you know, that could have been a Thousand Suns series. It could have been a Space Wolf series. It could have been a Dark Angel series, whatever. But instead, they threw them all into the melting pot. And of course, nothing's numbered. You know? So, when it comes down to these books, you can just say something like Angel Exterminatus. It's like, who's in that? Oh, it's got some Shattered Legions,
Iron Warriors,
Emperor's Children. Okay, you wouldn't know that just reading the name Angel Exterminatus, would you?
No, it's. I mean, there are so many cool things. I mean, I recently read Warhawk, and a very good book, by the way, recommended, and I was enjoying it. And all of a sudden, Sigismund and Khan are having their climactic battle with each other in a book called Warhawk. And I'm just like, isn't this supposed to be the story of the Khan and Mortarion slapping each other until they're both dead? Like, why are we jump? I know we're at the Siege of Terra, but like, even the titles of the Horus Heresy books seem to want to do everything at once, you know, and that's entirely the problem. You don't know where to go for your cool moments. What if you want to read about Sigismund? You've got to go on a Reddit post somewhere and have like a weird, you know, meandering list of these books that you can read. Anyway, moving on, because I'm going to be here every day talking about Horus Heresy. Watch your first one about 40k.
I kept mine a lot simpler. I just listed them as one sentence talking points.
Okay.
What is happening with the Dark Eldar and Ynnari?
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. So, fun fact, the Ynnari thing happened when I was originally starting to be a manager at Games Workshop. So, I was working as a staff member, and the amount of meetings that we had, where we sat upstairs, or we went to one training day, where we literally sat around a table and we were discussing what the new box sets were going to have in them and how we were going to market them and stuff. And you know what nobody said around those tables? The lore. They all talk about how hot Yvraine was for some reason. It's a model, dude. Calm down. You know, and how cool Cypher is, and how cool and Guilliman was, because obviously he was in a similar box set. So we had all those box sets. We had the Triumvirate. We had the Ynnari there as well, and nobody knew what the hell was going on with the lore. Simply because the way that it was written was very Eldar in the way that it was written. It was very wishy-washy. It was very all over the place. And essentially what you need is the Eldar god of death. So we've got all these different gods. Cain, god of murder, and you know, all these other things. Whereas Ynnari is the god of death. He is the god, or it is the god of all of the Eldar souls that are trapped within the craft worlds, or in the Wraithbone, the Spirit Stones, and things like that. All of the souls that haven't gone to be devoured by Slaanesh are congealing their power into being this avatar god of death, essentially. And rebirth as well, which is why Yvraine is able to go and resurrect Guilliman. Don't ask me how. It still makes my brain hurt. Why is she there? I swear to God she's there just so people can ship her and Guilliman for memes. I just don't get it.
That Gathering Storm 3 is plot contrivance of the movie.
It literally is.
A book that is given to people who are first learning how to write on what not to do.
Yeah. How not to shoehorn in the return of somebody. Guilliman just could have fucking stood up. What if his wounds healed? It's been like 5,000-6,000 years since he was like nearly mortally wounded by Fulgrim. Why can't he just stand up? You've been telling us for years, Games Workshop, that his wounds are healing even in stasis. Why can't the Emperor just reach out and go, I've been healing you for 5,000 years. Now it's time to get up. Stop being so lazy. No, that's fine. That works. Why do we need Yvraine? Why do we need people like that? One thing I will say, the models are banging. The Visearch, probably my favourite Eldar model of all time, with his big ass sword. More of that, please. Yvraine's really cool. The Incarnate's really cool. Love it. It's just the wishy-washy nature of the Eldar God of Death. It could have been such a cool ass thing for me.
But I bring it up. I bring it up specifically because they've done nothing with it.
No,
that was
died
what,
definitely.
2015, I think.
Yeah.
So that's 8 years.
That was end of 2016
or
end of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 7 years. 7 years have not plucked on that thread once.
No.
And if you bring back Primarchs, that is a Primarch level character.
Well, here's the thing: Xenos players only allowed to have nice things when it suits the Imperium. So, the very reason why we got Yvraine and we got all that stuff coming back was because they needed some sort of contrivance to bring Guilliman back. Since now they don't need it, who cares? You know, who cares?
I'm just going to throw this out there. It would have been good to see something done with the Ynnari plotline and bring back Emperor's Children in 9th instead of World Eaters.
That would have been really cool. That would have been really cool. I mean,
what would I know?
As much as I don't get why we can't have World Eaters and Khorne, but that just, goes beyond the by. Because all you've got for World Eaters is a few new models for their range and Angron. There's no reason why we can't do that for Emperor's Children as well and bring back, update the Eldar line. Well, we don't really need to these days, but update the Eldar line to have more of a give people things to do. In fact, that's one of my points later on. And I'll jump into it now because it actually goes off of your thing.
Yeah, jump into it. Go for gold.
So this where am I on here? Right. So it actually goes into the Horus heresy as well. So no alien presence in 40K or the Horus heresy makes itself known, essentially, right? So the entire thing lacks complete depth for me as a setting. It's more guilty of Horus heresy doing it, but to be honest, it kind of goes with the territory. It's called the Horus heresy. But in short, it's simply less interesting to have a setting that is human-centric and not doing anything else. Unless you're in the mood for some serious bolter and power armor porn. And don't get me wrong, I think even the best of us, sometimes we're in the mood. Sometimes we're definitely in the mood to see Sigismund chop off some heads and to see people getting shot in the face with rapid-firing RPGs. But there are other things going on in 40K and the Horus Heresy, though, that would give a different take aside from Space Marines and normal humans wandering around thousands of different fetch quests and odd jobs, right? It's just hard to care about something when you know it will not really affect the outcome of the wars in our settings themselves. You know, whenever you're watching something and the Orcs doing something or the Tyranids doing something, you know what's going to happen. You know they're not going to do anything. They're not going to win. You know, what's the point? Just move on, you know?
There's several stories in the Horus Heresy where Xenos get involved, and they're some of the more interesting stories. Of course, you won't know where to find them half the time, but think Murder and the Interrex are interesting examples. Also, you got in Fulgrim, you've got the Lear.
The layer, yeah.
And also there's an audio book prelude to Betrayer, the Arambowski Bowden book, where with Angron and Lorgar, where they come under attack from Eldar. The Eldar are trying to assassinate Angron because they know what he's going to become. And those are actually very interesting stories because it gives the Xenos some agency. It's like, yeah, the Horus Heresy was going on, but, you know, or at least in the late Great Crusade, the Xenos races are trying to fight back. And one of the best novels in all of the 30K range is the Primarch novel on Perturabo, the Hammer of Olympia, where they have fighting Harad for the majority of the novel.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very interesting to see that. It's like, oh, so that's what the Battles of the Great Crusade are like these totally unknown alien species that are never going to pop back up in 40K, except as like a one-sentence throwaway in a codex somewhere. And, oh, that is really interesting. Like, how do you fight a race which, you know, warps time?
Like,
Those are interesting story elements, but you don't get a lot of them, which is understandable in the Heresy.
There was even in Fulgrim, though, wasn't there? There was even one in Fulgrim with Eldrad telling Fulgrim to basically stop listening to the fucking sword. That's on his hilt. He's like, yeah, can you just not do that? Because that's weird.
Kind of does a disservice to Fulgrim's character, that.
Does, yeah, it does. And of course, you know, he has to kill an Avatar King with his bare hands because that's the power level.
Choked it to death because they breathe air.
Exactly, yeah. It's whatever. The one thing I wanted to bring up more about Horus Heresy is the Rangdan. Because those guys, I would happily trade in the 2 Caliban novels for an investigation, a full. I know we're getting it in the new novel. We're getting certain bits about the Rangdan genocides, but I would love a full breakdown of just what the hell they got up to with the Dark Angels. Considering the Dark Angels, their power in numbers was halved by that race. You know, there are so many really cool things out there that we could be focusing on, even in 40K as well, even moving it a bit forwards. You know, back to the point we made before, is that the only times we see the Eldar or anybody else doing anything, they're either being manipulated by an Inquisitor in the Tyranids and the Orcs in Octarius, or we're seeing they're doing things that are helping out humanity or helping out the Imperium. I'm sorry, the Eldar should be fighting wars at this point that are obliterating galaxies or are fighting the great game with the Chaos Gods. They shouldn't be caring, really, what happens to the Imperium. You know? It's not really. It's why I'm kind of a big fan of the Exodites and things like that, because they just don't give a shit. But I would like to see Xenos races being treated as their own thing, rather than being an hors d'oeuvre to the main course of the Imperium, you know?
Well, my next point flows into that one nicely then.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
The Tau Empire and the sub-races and their representation in the lore and on the tabletop. Because as far as I can see, a couple of old units of Kroot, Vespid, a few name drops, mech suits! Like, for all of the jokes people make about the Tau, those client races, Demiurge and, obviously the Kroot, there's so many of these, and humans as well, that have moved into Tau service. What are they doing with that? Yeah. Like, they want to have this bloated universe where, every man and his dog gets a story, and yet they don't do anything at all on the tabletop or realistically in the stories with those particular things. Well, and people make fun of the Tau. Of course they're going to make fun of the Tau, because all they do is portray them as Gundam.
Yeah, they're not explained either. But the thing is, though, they are the only race that do that as well. That's such a unique selling point of the Tau, is that they take other races and say, you got more fingers than us. That's cool. Do you want a gun? Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. They're the only people who do stuff like that. The Orcs don't do it. The Eldar. I mean, would an Eldar be caught dead allowing a human to wear some of their armor? I don't think so. The Imperium, apart from like the Ordo Xenos, who sometimes use alien weaponry to combat aliens, nobody really actually melds in with other people and says, "Oh, well, why don't you fight with us?" Happens in fantasy a lot. Happens in fantasy a hell of a lot. There was even a time we could take ogres with Empire because they're mercenaries and they're being paid with food.
Oh yeah, dogs of war.
Yeah, dogs of war. Yeah, exactly. So like, I think Tau are the only people who actively do that, and unfortunately, I think one of the reasons why Games Workshop stay away from it is due to politics. I think it's due to a lot of the memes about communism and things like that have gone along with the Tau. I think there's a very good reason why they've gone, no, we don't really want to write about that. Because they're then feeding into that, everybody's the same, everybody's homogenized in brains, and everyone's being manipulated by the... And by the way, turning them grimdark, as in turning the ethereals as being these really manipulative, guys, bringing them more in line with the more radical ideologies that are going on in the real world, that's not something I think you strictly need in 40k. I think the Tau are cool enough to stand on their own. I'm speaking of somebody who, when I was a kid, I played the game Fire Warrior on PS2, and I was like, these guys are the coolest. This is the coolest shit ever. Like, this is what I want. Like, they are literally fighting for the greater good. Now, there's no reason we can't have that, but just say they're really naive and so they'll never win. That's fine. But yeah, I totally agree. Like we should be investigating why people are joining the Tau. Why people are saying, hey, this is actually quite a good alternative to, working in slave labour camps for the next 100 years. Or we can go live on this amazing world. I mean, Pancreas No Work did an amazing video on the Tau that basically explained it. It was like, yeah, you could live on this, post-Gloriana, city that is cyberpunk in the best way, or you can live on this slave labour camp for the next 100. What do you want to do? Well, we'll go and join the Tau, thanks, Again, it does feed back into serving the Imperium, though, in that the reason why we don't investigate, one, is political, but I think the reason why we don't investigate why the Tau are good to join is because it would devalue the Imperium a hell of a lot. And Games Workshop can't afford to do that.
Very interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Do you know what I mean? Like if they say, hey, the Tau are amazing, and of course humans want to join them because they're great and they have all these things. And they have really good agriculture. They've got shielding technology that can change climates and change weather patterns and change whole geological statuses of cities and things like that. They don't attract demons. They don't attract chaos. In fact, chaos stay away from them because their firepower is so great they can just annihilate them into oblivion whilst not being possessed by demons. So, do you know what would make a really cool story? Actually, going on what you just said. What if Chaos saw the other people in the Tau Empire as a way in? Do you know what I mean? What if they started possessing the humans within the Tau Empire? and started getting in that way, what would the Tau do? That's when you could bring in the grim dark nature of Tau, where they go, okay, bolt to the head, bang, because you are one of us, but you're not technically one of us. So,
I think that's sort of happened in the latest expansion, like the latest expansion of their empire, the next sphere. They went through the warp and had some warpy shenanigans occur, and had to put down a bunch of other races, or the sub races.
That would just be so cool. I want that investigated far.
Can't do anything with it on the tabletop, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. So we could have mind-leashed humans where like, well, we can't trust you to think creatively. We can't trust you to think outside the box because you'll attract things like this. And
yeah, you're not exactly seeing people queuing up though for the latest Tau novel at Games Workshop store, and why is that? Because well, they don't make many, and when they do, well, the narrative isn't exactly the most engaging.
Well, yeah, I everything in 40K serves Space Marines. That's the status quo. And anything that you approach in 40K from a lore standpoint, you need to have that in mind. It doesn't matter what race you are. Everything in 40K, even if you're a normal human, as in Imperial Guard, you serve Space Marines. You serve selling Space Marines. So if it doesn't do that, then the lore decision isn't taken. That's something that I've noticed throughout 40K. It's a really weird phenomenon where you almost can't give too much credit to other races just in case they start to outshine Space Marines, because that's not what they're trying to sell. They're trying to sell Space Marines, and it's a travesty because there are so many really cool xenos races out there. I mean, I'm starting my own. I'm collecting Eldar this year, and it's my 10th edition army because of course I'm stubborn because I've got a Dark Angels army. But why would I stick with that when it's the big thing for 10th edition? Let's go and do something else. But the very fact is, there's a very good reason why we don't look at the War in Heaven. There's a very good reason why we don't look at the Empire that the Eldar once had. Why everybody else needs to be in the autumn of their years, where the wonderful, beautiful Rabute Gilliman is making a new Imperial Golden Age. At the end of the day, the Tau aren't palatable to this hero complex that we have about the Imperium. Because if we tell the Tau as they are supposed to be, as in, we are here for the greater good, we are here to make sure that you have shit to eat, we're not this massive war machine. Yes, we have war parts to us, but we're all about the experience of being a sentient being in this galaxy and making sure that we can all live together. That's cool. And that's a cool message. But it will never...
I would put it to you.
Yeah.
I would put it to you. $100 says if they brought out a prequel series, The War in Heaven, and it was all about like the fall of the Necron Empire to, well, the Necron tier into the Necrons, that would sell well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Can you imagine those models of the human Necrons? That'd be baller. That'd be amazing. That'd be awesome.
Well, even if it was just a story, just to build the universe, as people like to say. It's great when they build the universe of the Horus heresy in 4 bajillion novels, but they won't do, a 6-part novel series. In fact, sorry, it just, as we're talking, the Eldar, weren't there like Aspect Lords novels coming out, and then they just seem to have...
They're supposed to be Phoenix Lords novels, yeah. They were supposed to be.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
Yeah.
Where did they go?
This is the thing, right? Again, we're going back to the similar point. Everything serves the Imperium. So, where do you fit in a novel about Jane Zar or Malgan Ra or Cardarus or any of the other Phoenix Lords, Azarian and all of those other guys? Where do you fit them in? Because they are big characters. Where do you fit them in around 10th edition? The one thing that we don't have and we've never had, and please don't shoot me because this isn't what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need an End Times, but we've never had an End Times level event where the one thing that End Times did well, the one thing it did well, is that it gave everybody time in the sun in the Warhammer world. What they did with that time was abysmal, of course, but everybody got their chance to do something, to have their own novel, to have their own part of a novel. We don't get that in 40K, and that's something that we haven't had yet, and I was hoping that 10th edition would be the time when we would have things like Eldar and Tau and all of these other people. I was hoping that the Arcs of Omen books would be that. Would be like, the Arcs of Omen are going to go to all these different parts of the galaxy, and everybody's going to get to punch Chaos in the face. Awesome. It wasn't that, though. And even me reading them now, I'm like, oh, right, so it's just Imperium again.
Unfortunately, not to rain on the parade, but the Arcs of Omen is bound to fail because Chaos is not a threat.
Yeah.
They are a toothless, fangless threat led by an armless failure, as they would say, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because Chaos broke Cadia, and then where have they gone since? Nowhere.
Yeah.
And even with all these warp rifts and all this across the galaxy, yada yada yada, they're contained.
Yeah.
And if they're contained, they're not a threat. And if they're not a threat, there are no stakes.
Problem is, if they're not contained, the setting's over. I mean,
it would make more sense. It would make more sense to have the Imperium being attacked from all directions at once by all types of Xenos, sensing the weakness of the Imperium.
That'd be cool. Well, that was the
crumbling.
setting.
The Imperium is the Roman Empire.
That was the original setting. Yeah, the original setting was that.
Yeah. You got your Goths, your Huns, your Visigoths. All nibbling away at the edges of the Empire, and but they don't do anything interesting with it.
Well, the thing is, when the Imperium is expanding,
wins.
as it is, the Imperium is expanding right now, and it shouldn't be. Like I know we've got this rift in the center of the galaxy, but both Imperiums are pushing outwards. It's a hopeful setting right now. Weirdly, I don't know why.
I would treat Gilliman's revival and the line or that as something more like a Flavius Belisarius. Like, yep, cool, you're recapturing a bit of Northern Africa and Old Italy for the Byzantine Empire, but you're just staving off the inevitable and you're wasting precious resources to do so. Yeah,
I mean, the one thing that I
that's what they should do, but they're not.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be. We're never going to do that. But why would you kill your cash cow? I mean, that would be. But then again, I don't think that's what you're saying. I think what you're saying is we can replace it with something far more interesting, which is like the Imperium splitting off into 1,000 different points and doing that. In fact, I think when I was doing the lore rewrite, I did that. Like, I ended up having the Emperor have his half of the galaxy and telling Gilliman to fuck off, essentially, because you're no son of mine, and all that sort of stuff. So, like, the original setting of 40K was that. It was what you just said, like the Rick Priestley, all that really cool lore from 2nd, 3rd edition was literally. I remember reading the 3rd edition book, and it was about the fall of the Imperium. That's what the game was about. It wasn't about the Imperium going out there and kicking ass and conquering worlds. It was about being heroic and fighting in the face of knowing you're going to die, but doing it anyway. Because you're part of the Imperium, goddammit, and the Emperor needs you, and you've got such a galvanized. You reading it, going, "I'm gonna fucking kick some Xenos in the arse," There's a very good reason. We'll
spend 1 million lives to gain 5 minutes.
Exactly. There's a very good reason why the big release for 3rd edition was Black Templars. That was the huge thing. Well, the Land Raider, yeah, but the huge thing that came out. In the White Dwarfs and later on was the Black Templars. They came back. We had the Emperor's Champion with all these really cool rules and models. The most xenophobic, angry, we're dying, but we don't care. We're going to beat the shit out of you anyway, and you'll know you've been in a fight. We don't care if you win. You'll know you've been in a fight. That kind of chapter came out, and it was the most 40K time of 40K. Essentially, was 3rd edition for me. It was 3rd and 4th was the most 40K of 40K. Then it became a meme of itself towards 7th. I mean, it was a complete meme at 7th. Nothing moving forwards. And now we're going forwards. It's becoming more of a hopeful setting, which is not a terrible thing in itself. But you can't have light without dark. And I think at the moment, we're getting a bit overpowered in terms of the light. We're seeing too much of Gilliman. We're seeing too much of Dante. We're seeing too much of frankly, the Grey Knights. It pains me to say it. But they don't need to be everywhere at once. We don't, it's very unrealistic that the Grey Knights just turn up, even with the prognosticars, they just turn up when Angron is there. I mean, can't we give Angron 5 minutes to do something cool?
Well, as I said before, it's all about stakes. And right now, there are no stakes to the Imperium because they always pull more troops out and they can never finish the story as the loser.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. Haha. This is great, because we're linking in directly into my next thing. So, Games Workshop are terrified of upsetting you the fans, right? Okay. This is more of a 40k one, because we know what happens in the Horus Heresy. It does have a definitive ending, which is why it's so cherished by a lot of people, including yourself, right? So, as such, no duels or battles ever seem to end conclusively in 40k. Campaigns are kept going well past their sell-by date, hello Armageddon. 2, yes, give you more time to play in that campaign setting and keep the fun going. Yeah, I agree, that's one thing. But also because Games Workshop are absolutely scared to death to actually declare a winner or a definitive new status quo in a certain area of the galaxy. Duels are even worse. Oh my god. Every time we have two champions crossing blades in 40k, they fight with honour, quote unquote, and then they are either dragged away by their subordinates after beating each other into near oblivion, or they nod respectfully and walk away from each other. No stakes, nothing changes, no one of note dies. To be fair, I should probably be careful what I'm asking for, as Games Workshop will likely kill off everybody but Ultramarines and Space Wolf characters at this rate, because they've just killed off a Grey Knight character, and there was a part of me that was like, you motherfuckers, one of you's watched something where I've been ranting or something. I know, I'm not that arrogant, you know what I mean, but I did have a little think of, you just killed a Grey Knight character. After all my rants about killing off characters, and the only one that gets killed off in Arcs of Omen is a fucking Grey Knight character. I swear to God. What do you think? Do you think, am I going a bit too far, or do you reckon, is there a narrative purpose to this?
I think they undervalue the intelligence of their player base. Like, yes, there are people out there who, you know, have issues, we'll say, you know, social skills and what have you, but something like Game of Thrones show that you can have favoured characters and you can kill them off as long as it is narratively satisfying.
Yeah, and we missed them.
Ignore the last couple of seasons of the show, but, you know, you kill off Ned Stark in the first series.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, jeez, like, what?
Yeah.
And then you also kill off Robb Stark. You cut off Jaime Lannister's hand. Like, you can have these things happen to your characters, and if you trust your audience, then you can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not everything has to have a happy ending. You know, Tolkien killed Boromir.
Yeah.
You know, he got redemption in Sacrifice, but he killed Boromir. You know, you trust your audience. He killed Thorin at the end of The Hobbit. And both his nephews, the heirs to the throne.
I think another thing of me maybe being careful what I ask for is the end times. I know people are going to bring that up. The amount of people who died in ridiculous ways in the end times. Games Workshop haven't proved that they're good at deaths, apart from Sigismund. Sigismund they killed off in a good way.
I have a major point I want to make at the end, where I'll circle back on that.
Okay.
So I won't unveil too much in my cards now.
Okay, cool. Carry on. Yep.
Yeah, it's just a funny situation, you know. Like I actually wrote myself a little note for a fifth point in here. You know, but I'll touch on that in a minute. It's you treat your audience with respect. Treat them, and even if you aim your novels at two different, you know, tiers of, I won't say intelligence, but at least two different tiers of reading. You know, the people who are just your casual readers and your people who want that real in-depth, tell us how the finances work on this planet, right? There's always those two types of people who want the full world building.
What's Aragorn's tax policy?
Exactly. There's always these two types of people. So build it in that way and treat your audience with respect. If you said to your audience that, you know, Chaos Karis dies in a duel with Angron, people go, yeah, makes sense, Demon Primarch, you know, but as long as you have a satisfying end for him, like he goes out in style, people would accept it.
Do you reckon... Alright, so here's one thing. I was thinking there when you were talking about how does 40k differ to those things that you mentioned in Game of Thrones, and spoilers for those things, by the way. I know we're far too late, but we apologise if we spoiled any of that for you. Or Lord of the Rings. I mean, if you're a nerd and you don't know that Boromir dies in Lord of the Rings, sorry. But how does 40k differ from those things? And the one thing that I can...
Because it infantilizes its community.
Yeah, that is one thing, but I'm going more on a materialistic point of view. The one thing 40k does is they think, I swear to God, they think that killing off a Cato Sicarius, everybody who has a Cato Sicarius model will find that the value has gone down on that model and think, well, he's not a part of 40k anymore, so why should I buy this model? You know? Why should I go out of my way to buy this model, or think that this model's cool, or have this model in my army? What Games Workshop always want to do, and this is the same reason why they don't do sales, by the way, and I was told this verbatim, right? Is because if they do a sale, it devalues the mystique of their models. It becomes just like any other product, even if it's another hobby product in the world. They are...
Yeah, their marketing team are idiots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are. But
well, okay. Look at Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is proof that is a falsehood, because the Lord of the Rings game system, how many of the characters in it are dead?
Yes. Yeah.
Heaps of them. Mm-hmm. But because they have, they say we provide you the setting, we provide you the models. You pick what setting and game and timeline and missions you want to play within that universe that we've provided you with.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you have to do. You say Cato Sicarius dies fighting against Angron. Okay, he's not going to be there for later campaigns, but you could definitely fight that campaign with him. And in friendly matches and tournaments and all those sort of things, and you can make your own campaign at home. Like, that's a lost art, having your own campaign with your local friends.
Oh, yeah.
But there is nothing stopping you from pulling out that character and using it in any of those situations or playing it in your local game store. It's just if you were playing a narrative game set after that point, you wouldn't use it.
I mean,
not the biggest deal, is it?
I completely agree, but I also think Games Workshop aren't smart enough to realise that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, not just that. I will put an extra little asterisk, a little caveat on that point. Cato Sicarius, as a great example, is a non-Primaris Marine. Doesn't have a miniature, right?
Yeah.
He has this old, I think relatively nice miniature. But people have shown me, and I don't want to insult the audience, but they have shown me that they will literally drop on the ground the old miniature and stomp them into the dirt the minute a new character drops, a new version of their character. You could say it with Dante, you could say it with Azrael, you could say it with... Mephiston, the Grimaldus, you name it, right? Mm-hmm. They are not that attached to that model in the old power armor. They just put up with it because it's what they have.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you said they were killed off because we don't intend to make a Primaris model for them, people would be like, oh, well, fine. It was an old model anyway. I'm not really, he didn't look right next to all of my Primaris Marines on the tabletop.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think...
You still got the model, they're taking it away from you.
I think, and this is it goes back to your point about respecting the intelligence of your audience, though. I'm with you, I don't think they do. So I think that's one of the main reasons why we don't see things, people being killed off more appropriately, is because, one, they're terrified of upsetting you because they don't value your intelligence as fans. They think that as soon as they kill off a character, the sales are going to tank because you're simpletons, you're children, and you can't get over the fact that somebody's dead. And so, but as we just pointed out, there is a whole game that they sell in Middle Earth. Well, they used to sell it. They no longer sell it in most stores, and we were told not to sell it in our stores because it was not one of our mainline games, quote unquote, which is bullshit because it's my favourite Games Workshop game. But getting away from that. There's an entire game out there, as you've just said, that proves that false. That says, no, we know Boromir is dead, but he's still one of the best heroes in the game. And he's still one of the ones you will take if you're taking any sort of Gondorian army. He's sort of he's one of the go-to guys,
People take Wormtongue and Denethor. They're not exactly got the big fandoms behind them, you know. The Denethor fan club is pretty small.
Exactly. But anyway, moving on, because we're going to go down that rabbit hole. So, are you next? Is yours next?
Yes.
Go for it.
So this is one I thought of as we were talking, because I hadn't quantified it. They don't have a hard set of rules written down that they adhere to, and so they break the universe in frustrating ways. Specifically, an example I will give is the Scythes of the Emperor. So, spoilers for events that happened around the Genestealer cults. But Genestealer cults infiltrated the homeworld of the Sides of the Emperor, and the Genestealer's Kiss infected members of the chapter. So there are Genestealer and affected members of a Space Marine chapter.
That's not possible, though,
And
is
it's
it?
only the fact that this is legitimately war that happened in 8th edition, that the Sides of the Emperor are walking around infected, and it's only the fact that they are Marines that have mental fortitude, that they're able to overcome the Genestealer's Kiss trying to tell them to start up a Genestealer cult. Is that not one of the dumbest contrivances you've ever heard?
Thing is, right?
And that just shouldn't be a thing, right?
As somebody who, as part of my living, proofreads novels, mostly fantasy and sci-fi. If somebody came to me with a Star Wars book, Disney have asked me to do this, and it completely, let's say that we have a Palpatine returning for the 3rd time, but before he's come back the 2nd time, sort of a thing. That wouldn't make it past me as a proofreader. Saying that's a stupid idea. You need to go and rework this and take that character out. That entire idea is retarded. It shouldn't be here. Whereas, I don't get how that's gotten past Black Library. But this isn't the first time I've thought that, though. This is not the first time I've thought, do you give a shit about the holes that are blown into your own lore and your own universe
Well,
by when you do shit?
You see, as Godos, right? The Eldar don't like using their own tanks because they're not tanky enough, so they steal Imperial tanks and use those. That happened in an older novel.
Yeah.
They don't have hard rules of this is what this faction can and can't do, and doing this crosses the line.
Well,
They need to have that. I feel
it's the very reason why. I mean, I've been called a bugbear or whatever for not liking things like Divinity, like the Divinity Original Sin and the setting that it is a part of, because it doesn't take itself seriously and it doesn't set any rules. Anything can happen at any time, and magic can sort of do anything. When you have talking skeletons and things like that are an actual race in your setting, yeah, okay, mental, right? Just odd stuff going on all over the place. But if you don't set core rules of what is possible and what is not possible, I don't know why I should care. Because if you don't care to put rules down and to put scaffolding there in your world, why should I give a shit? And I think that's where we're starting to. Games Workshop, by the way, returning to the wider point that you were making, them breaking their own lore is one of the first videos of mine that actually took off. This is like a year or about 2 years ago now, where I said literally they do it all of the time. They snap their own lore over their knee to sell models or to have cool shit happen or to give people a win, right? They will do it all of the time. I'm not here to stifle people's creativity and say you can't do this and you can't do that. But if you are doing it, you need to tell us why it's different this time. And it needs to be a good explanation. It needs to be a bloody good explanation. There's a very good reason why, segue out of left field, why the Mass Effect 3 endings didn't work originally, right? They were completely out of left field. They completely broke the law up until that point. They showed a complete lack of respect for the intelligence of the audience going forwards. And they were really lazy. All of those things chucked in together. 40K does that all the time. On a book-by-book basis most of the time. Where they will literally take a facet of the law, they will break it, shit it out, and say, yeah, it's this now. Why is it different this time? Most of the time, we're not even told. We're not even told why it's different this time. We're just there to run with it. Because they hide behind this facade of, nothing is... All of the narrators of 40K are not to be trusted. They hide behind that all the time. Or the warp means that if you believe something enough, it comes true. That only takes you so far. That only takes you so far, and I completely agree with what you're saying. Completely. They do it all the time. I mean, look at even from a mechanical standpoint, I will shut up in a minute, I promise. Even from a mechanical standpoint, I'm going to say it again. The Months of Shame, right? Saying it again. Yeah, Pancreas did a good video on it as well. The Space Wolves should not be able to slap an Inquisitor. Never mind kill one. If any Space Marine lays hand on an Inquisitor, that should be it. Dead. Gone. I don't care if you're a founding chapter, I don't care if you were a Legion back in the day, I don't care if you're the fucking Blood Angels. If you lay hand on an Inquisitor and it's in public and people can see it, you're done. You're gone. You're finished, right? Because the Inquisitors, the Inquisition, are the Imperial bureaucracy. They are the people who are deciding who gets what reinforcements and when. They have fingers in so many different pies, you can't cross them unless you're the Space Wolves. Then we'll break everything. Then we'll break the entire thing. They kill a Grey Knight one-on-one. We're told, a Grandmaster one-on-one, we're told for ages that that's not possible, right? A Grey Knight Grandmaster is probably, apart from a Custodes, the apex of what a normal Space Marine can be. Yeah, Grimnar just kills one. And by the way, he kills one with a fucking Khornate axe. He has an axe of Khorne that he just drags around with him all of the time. That he kills people with. And yet no Grey Knight is there going, that weapon's a bit demony. What's going on there? They do it several times a book. Several times a book. And it winds me up. I'm going to shut up now. Like, you run with it. Because I'm sick to death of them doing shit like this. It just gets right under my skin.
Obviously fully agree with everything you just said. I also want to point out in the latest couple of books and with the Arcs of Omen, now Grey Knights can also suffer from falling to chaos, which again was one of those. For the longest time, that was what was special about that was because I once this is going back to third, fourth edition, showing my vintage here. But I was like, oh, here is my, I did conversion of a Grey Knight. He's a corrupted Grey Knight, and the store staff members just flat out told me, yeah, there's never been a Grey Knight corrupted.
Can't happen, yeah.
It cannot happen, right? And good on them for just stomping that out straight away. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, okay then. And I wasn't actually upset, like, oh, my conversion went to waste. I was like, oh, well, that's a learning experience.
No, I mean, it's a cool model. It could be something else, you know?
Yeah, it was cool for like what 14-year-old me could do. It was not a very good conversion at all, but we won't talk about that. But that's an example of the sort of thing that that was a hard and fast rule, and then they just broke it because they just felt like it.
So
that's all it came down to.
Remind me what happens because I've not read that book yet. But you're not spoiling it because at the end of the day I'm reading them for work, essentially for the channel. What book's that happening? Because I know it hasn't happened in the first two books. So.
So I think it had to do with the fallout of the Khorne got angry, and so he swung his sword, and then a whole bunch of the galaxy instantly became corrupted.
No, I that was in the book. They kind of skated over who was fighting who in that one. So they basically said the murder curse, right? So the murder curse happens, everybody starts murdering each other. I'm not sure whether they say the Grey Knights were involved in it. I think they may have said everybody's fighting and they left the Grey Knights out. But I read it last week, so don't quote me on that. But if they did say the Grey Knights were involved, that's a typo to me. That's not a hard and fast. This is
really because they've already bathed in a lot of Sisters of Battle blood. So
I know. And there's the Silver Knight theory as well, with who is the Silver Knight and why is he bowing down to Slaanesh? I mean, Slaanesh is a big goth titty. Why would you not bow down to Slaanesh? But like, yeah, there's a whole thing of, is that Khaldor Drago? Is that, I like to think it's Sigmar for some reason. It made me, it'd be really, really, really funny. But yeah,
nobody's thought it through.
Nobody's thought it through. They
don't know who it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's there so we can have conversations like this. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they said that Grey Knights can fall to chaos, because if that... But I swear to you, right, if I read that last week, and this might have been me, being such a Grey Knight fan, that I just refused to even read it in my mind, but I didn't see it. I didn't see the murder curse as affecting the Grey Knights, but I'm going to read it again, and I swear, if I read that tonight, and I read it back, and I've missed that, and a Grey Knight has fallen to chaos, I'm going to take this fan on my desk and throw it out my window, because that is the that is the one thing you don't touch. Not just for me, because I'm a big Grey Knight fan, but like in 40K in general, that's the one thing that we have as Grey Knight fans that Matt Ward gave us that we're allowed to keep. The one thing. Through all of the hatred and the vitriol that we get for playing a codex that was once overpowered 20 years ago, the one thing we got to keep is that none of us have ever or will ever fall to chaos. If they do it for the Grey Knights, though, I mean, we have the Emperor's Gene Seed, then what's to stop a Custodes from doing it? You know, you're opening up a can of worms, and that's what I'm terrified of. Because if they come for us with their moronic law and changing things up on the whim of things, it's only a matter of time before they say Custodes has fallen to chaos. And it'd be kind of like, do you remember like a wrestling storyline? I'm not sure if you're into it, called The Invasion back in the day, where they had WCW and ECW invading WWE, and it was this huge thing. But they had none of the big stars from those companies, so they just filled up their ranks with traitor WWE guys to really shore up the entire storyline, and it was lame, and it was just terrible. I can see them doing the same thing for 40k, where Abaddon is not a threat, so let's just make, you know, the new War Master a Custodes. Why not? Let's just go down there. Let's fill up all of their ranks with Imperial guys and make it that kind of a thing. Where does it end?
Double check it. I could be totally wrong, and I'm happy to eat the bullet if I am.
Okay. You carry on, and I'm gonna. Just...
No. I think it's your question next.
Can Grey Knights fall to chaos? I swear it will be the first. Okay. This is from yesterday. This is from yesterday on Lexicanum. I reread the original novel series and the Grey Knights and the new Arcs of Omen book series quite recently, and it clearly states in both books that no Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos, even under the greatest pressure. Okay, so there we go. But I still think that might be a typo in the new book. I'm gonna investigate that. I'm gonna have a look, because if I've missed that was a really good opportunity for a rant that I missed, and that's annoying me because I like ranting. It's one of my favourite things. So yeah, the next thing, and I wanted your opinion on this one, so please take it once I've said it and run with it. The size of the setting of 40k means no real stakes are in it aside from what is directly affecting the Emperor and the Imperium as a whole. And I guess that links back into what we were saying before about everybody serving the Imperial agenda, essentially. In essence, 40k is Horus Heresy 2.0, or at least it's becoming that. In the Warhammer Fantasy setting, if a Chaos Lord burns down a place like Middenheim, for example, that's a huge deal. If a Chaos Lord annihilated 5 Imperial planets that are of terror importance in a rampage, though, so what? The Imperium does that on a daily basis themselves. Really, the only time stakes are involved or allowed to be involved in 40k are when the Emperor and Guilliman or any of the Primarchs are involved. Everything else is just set dressing. Harsh, I guess, as someone who's about to get into Eldar, but also something that I think is true. What do you reckon?
I think the easiest way to display it is you'd be very familiar with Roman maps, right?
Yeah.
Maps of how the Empire grew, and then maps of how the Empire fell apart. I think you need something like that. You need to have that map of the galaxy that everyone knows, and instead of focusing on that Cicatrix Maledictum, actually have other empires very visibly, as in coloured, nibbling away at it. The Imperium is just an amorphous grey mass with labelled planets, but you see like the tendrils of the Hive fleets moving through the Imperium. You see a growing Orc Empire around where Gazkul is. You see the areas around different tomb worlds as they claim them, and actually show the Imperium being nibbled away at. And you can change that map up, like this is how we start the edition, here's the map as you know it. And then with each campaign book or each codex they bring out, you then nibble away at it. So you've got a physical display of what's happening to show that the Imperium is fighting a losing war. And it's not just, an episode of G.I. Joe where no matter what nefarious plan Cobra has that day, the situation's always saved.
Well, I don't think we'll ever get to that point unless we get rid of Abaddon, to be fair. But that is an amazing idea. That could even be done in something like White Dwarf, like every other month. There's a new campaign map of the entire galaxy, the state of play, and this is what's happening, and it's always shrinking. Like that's almost Lovecraftian in the way that it works. The dread, it's like, oh shit, they're getting closer.
Yeah,
and closer
and you can have those areas that get eaten away, eating towards like the big chapter homeworlds.
Yeah.
Like, here's the Hive Fleet encroaching on Baal. Here's, Medusa is about to be cut off by an orc horde. Whatever it might be, And they got things like the Phalanx of the Imperial Fist. They've got the Rock of the Dark Angels moving around the galaxy.
Yeah.
Put them in different locations. Do something with them.
That would be an absolutely...
have.
That's a brilliant idea. That's a really good idea. Like having like a just jumping off from your idea there is having like that White Dwarf thing, and you see the phalanxes in one area of the galaxy, and then it says, okay, the Imperial Fists are moving in general in this direction to combat this threat. Whereas there's other forces going elsewhere of the Imperial Fist in case that your forces aren't there, but they're going to say New Syria because the World Eaters are amassing there because it was their once home world, and that's where they're going to go, and that kind of a thing. And then you actually see it a few months later. The ship has now changed its location on the map to being over New Syria, and we're away on that campaign. That's an incredible idea.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of where things are headed. It's like following Montgomery moving through the desert against Rommel. And you can see like, oh, the Axis are clearly losing here, and you can see where the resources are going because we just keep getting told, the Marines are fighting on all fronts.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
All fronts.
Who's supplying them?
But if you're like, look, the Rock is here, but they have to try and get to there because the Lion needs to get the bulk of his Dark Angels there, but unfortunately he has to send a splinter fleet off in this other direction, and you can have two big red arrows on the map which say, the Dark Angels send part of their fleet this way, they send part that way, and then and that gives you an excuse to also involve those chapters in different campaigns.
That is
because you could say like the Dark Angels have they have assets over in this war zone, and they've got assets over in this one. And it also means that you could say that, the Lion wins in his war zone, he comes in, and you can get him involved in the other campaign, because now he rejoins forces with the rest of the chapter.
That's great. And you can even do, like, campaign results as well, so people upload it and things like that, how they want it to go, and how they want the narrative to go. That is an amazing idea. And that is something that could relatively... That's the one problem we've solved in this video, is that the stakes one. Is how the hell do we involve stakes? That's the way. It's something that Games Workshop could do at very little cost to themselves. Well, no cost to themselves, really, apart from paying a few writers that they're going to do anyway, and having a few 20 pages in a White Dwarf. Have a look. A White Dwarf should be match of the day for 40k, for the setting. At least a part of it should be like, okay, here's the highlights of what's been going on over the past year in 40k. There we go, bang. And every month should be like a year. So you go through the, so a year has happened in 40k. That's the one problem that we would have, in fact, because time doesn't flow in the same way across the galaxy at all times. So you could say,
you could do something like, if you've got those spheres of influence, and like let's say one is Necrons and one's Tyranids or something, right? And those the sphere of the Necrons expanding empire of a tomb world and the tendrils of a hive fleet are both going to intersect at an Imperial planet caught in the middle, then you get to have your cake and eat it too, because you can have a campaign book where you have Necrons versus Tyranids, and yet the Imperium can be involved because their world's sandwiched in the middle. And you can show it on the map.
That's also like a really cool thing of the arrows that you mentioned, like the fleet splitting off into different sectors and different places. If you are a Dark Angels player and you're not exactly sure on the Dark Angels going to the Solemn World, for example, and taking on the Fallen, you could say, well, I'm getting off here. So I'm part of that fleet, but I've been sent to this other world on the way. And it would give people a lot more of a solid footing to say, okay, our campaign is based here, and it fits into the actual narrative of 40k. That's the main thing for me. Whenever I've written my own lore, I've always tried to look on the Lexicon and website or whatever and fit it into the actual lore so it works. And you can actually reference things from my lore in the actual written lore of 40k. I think that would be a hell of a really good outreach, like an olive branch to say, we're building this together. So, whilst Games Workshop, we will dictate where the armies go on a macro scale. On a micro scale, it's up to you to decide what happens in the smaller conflicts that then dictate where we're going to go next. That'd be an
You know what they
incredibly
could
good way
do
of doing
with the
it.
Space Marine chapters, especially with the Space Marine chapter? People could vote for which chapter gets involved in a conflict.
Yeah, that'd be good.
You know, who do you want involved in this conflict? The Iron Hands or the Imperial Fists? And throw it out to the community. So what we think the Iron Hands, it's like, cool, the Imperial Fists and the Iron Hands spoke, and the Iron Hands said, we want to take that particular war zone. All right, it's yours. And off they went.
That is an.
You know, it gives the fans some agency.
It's also one thing that I think is really important going forwards. I mean, I know we've got the Lion now coming back. I'm going to have him there, which is great. But all it means to me is that the entire focus of 40k now is going to be on, you know, Dark Angels fighting the Tyranids, which we can see is going to be the main thing because it's what we're being shown, and the Fallen. That's literally what we're going to have for the first big bit of 10th edition. I think 40k is big enough. This is why I was campaigning for things like starter boxes should be more than 2 factions. You know, so we should have 10 starter boxes, all of different war zones across the galaxy. So you've got Tau against Orcs. You've got all of these different things with different stories going on at the same time. 40k as a universe is big enough to do that, and I think Games Workshop are leaving a lot of money on the table if they're just saying the Lion's doing this. And you can do whatever you want, because 40k is a big old setting, which is great. I mean, it means you can do what you want when you want, but it also robs us of that agency and those stakes that we've been talking about the entire time. Again, the Middenheim example, when a Chaos Lord burns down Middenheim at the culmination of a big campaign event, that's a big thing. Middenheim's a big city, and it's gone, and the Empire has to reel with that because it's one of its main trading hubs. Well, even with Baal, we just had Baal fall to the Tyranids, basically, annihilating most of the Blood Angels. What does that do to the wider Imperium? Nah, nothing. Nah.
Oh, it's the same as go back, to the tail end of 7th edition 40k. I know, ancient history to probably many of the viewers. The Thousand Suns basically destroy Fenris for all intents and purposes. They destroy the recruiting pool, they cripple the Space Wolves chapter, and then 2 minutes and 31 seconds into 8th edition, here's your 10,000 Primaris Marine Reinforcement Space Wolves, go forth. Exactly. So the Thousand Suns achieved diddly zip, and in fact they're probably weakened from it because they lost numbers.
Yeah, and they're not as replaceable because most of them are sorcerers as well, who've been trained for upwards of 5,000 to 6,000 years in the warp. So
not that the rules would tell you that, but anyway.
Not that the rules would tell you that. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean that's one thing I really hope they sort out with 10th edition is the psychic. They've taken away the psychic phase entirely, which makes me kind of worried that they've given up on the psychic people altogether. But hopefully they haven't. We'll see. But that's all I've got.
They don't know how to write them.
No, they don't know how to write them or write rules for them. But that's all I've got. We've gone through all my points. All of my big bugbears.
I've still got 2.
Okay, go. Let's do it.
So the first one I'll throw at you is just a bit of a gotcha question, and that is, could you name for me all of the Space Marine units?
No. Categorically.
I am willing to bet you $50 if you sat me down and said, I'm going to pull out any 3rd edition codex, can you name me all the units in them? I'd probably be able to get it.
The original ones,
right?
Yeah.
Granted, 3rd edition, much smaller codexes, but I could tell you the entire game system. And back in those days, the Games Workshop staff knew every single faction and every single faction's rules off by heart. They didn't have to pick up the codex off the shelf. You go into a Games Workshop now, even the nicest, most clued on managers who just try and do their job for the majority. I really do want to reinforce that point. They have to pick up books and go, geez, is that how that rule works? And
that's me, by the way, man. I did that all of the time. Like, if people would come in and be like, oh, this Riptide's really cool. Yeah. What rules does it have? Well, let's look at it together, shall we? We'll investigate together. We'll have a nice bonding moment with it's like, I did that all the time.
Yeah, exactly right. And my point there being, like, the sheer amount of bloat has gotten to the point where you can't name, unless you're a fan of a faction, and even then, there are some fans who missed 1 or 2 units in their faction, especially when it comes to the Space Marines. Like, if you're a Gene Stealer cosplayer, you're probably going to know everything because there's, 12 units. I'm being facetious there. But that's sort of a part of the state we're in, is that the bloat has become so bad in points where you can't name everything. And that also ties into bad writing, because I wanted to bring it full circle there. In the Horus Heresy novels, it used to be they would just say, there were tanks driving past in the distance. Now when they write a Horus Heresy novel, it's like, and there was a squadron of Sicker and Punisher tanks available now at Forge World for £34,
Yeah.
88. It just takes you out of the setting when they overly name something, because...
Yeah.
And I know I'm sidetracking here. When was the last time you saw a piece of art in the book where you couldn't buy the miniature in the art?
Shit, that's a good point.
They used to just do art for the sake of just, here's the setting, here's a snapshot of the universe.
It's probably
and it would.
the Thunder
And
Fire
now
cannon
they're
way
going.
back in the day. Way back in the day.
And now they're going back to that old art and they're trying to nostalgia bait you with it. They're like, oh, remember that Sister of Battle with her foot up on the skull off that one cover? Here you go.
Yeah.
Remember that one Black Templar holding the axe? Here you go. By the way, it's Primaris. They're going back and they're farming that old artwork, but they're afraid to make artwork now where they just show you a random snapshot of, hey, here's just some random Ultramarine that you can't buy him, but hey, if you wanted, you could convert him.
Yeah.
You could make it yourself. Because isn't that part of the hobby?
Well,
is that not part of what draws you to the hobby? The ability to make your own thing. And you just get that little inspiration tick from a beautiful piece of artwork.
Well, I think a lot of the time with... here's the thing, right? I remember there's this really cool... You might know what it is. In the 3rd edition rulebook, there is a picture of what I assume is a Dark Eldar warrior of some description. And he is holding his fists, kind of like the X-Men sort of a thing, but by his chest, right? So he's got these 2 spikes on his fists. And he's looking directly at the camera, and it's black and white. And it jumped out at me. It was like this one thing where and we weren't even talking about Dark Eldar at that point in the rule book. It was just a cool picture that somebody had obviously seen in the studio and thought, that's badass. I'm going to throw that in there. There's no model for that. As you just said, there's no model for that. There's no. It's just a snapshot of something awesome that is in. And you could make that model.
Great one.
Easily.
There was a great one in 3.5 Codex, I think it was. That was like Abaddon's Chosen. It was like his 4 key. Yeah. And they're just all like a unique, like, here's the slightly cornate guy, the slightly Zinchian guy, and they just don't sell anything like it. But I've always, and I really should get my fat ass off this chair and do it, I always wanted to make those Chosen,
those dudes.
But, it was just those little snapshots, or I don't know if you'd remember, in the 3.5, when you got to each section on the different gods, they had a piece of artwork. Like, there was a Khorne champion, a Noble champion, a Slaneshi one. The Slaneshi guy had just like these pitch black bug eyes, and like, I think he had fingers coming out of his chin.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but it's you should find that. Whoever's editing the video, find it, put it in the video at this point. God. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, but they don't make those characters. But when you see it, you're like, yes, that there is this faction in a nutshell.
Whenever I saw that particular guy, I always thought, because they have noise marines with guitars, I always thought that he'd be doing the Jimi Hendrix thing. He's playing it with his tongue, but he's not. He's literally playing it with the fingers on his chin when he brings it up there. He just cheats. It's complete cheats. It's God's fun. Oh, you want to do that? Okay, fine. There's your fingers. That kind of a thing. I just the Doom Rider also is something that is for years didn't have a model. For years that had nothing, or at the very least, it had a model that was so hard to get hold of. But art kept cropping up all over the place, and then all of a sudden, he was not involved in nearly every Chaos Codex. There'd be rules for him there, but no art. There'd be nothing there.
Yep.
Because they're not
and
art.
Just vanished.
Yeah, because they're not selling the model, so they may as well not be in the game. And that's the thing when I say about recast and stuff like that. If Games Workshop aren't providing a service to you in terms of the model that you want, by the way, what I mean by that is I don't mean like if they're selling an Imperial Knight that you don't like the look of, don't buy it. Don't buy it. Go and make your own. Go and recast your own. Go and do what you want to do. Go 3D print one of your own. It's your hobby, and it costs a lot of time and a lot of money. And if you're not getting exactly what you want, then you need to be questioning why you're not getting what you want, and then go and get it yourself if you need to. As we're saying with it's almost like a bankrupt morality of art right now, where we're not seeing people like John Blanche, right? John Blanche would just go ham. He would just come in, have a spliff, whatever he was doing, and just headbutt his writing station until he came up with something really cool, you know. The 40K used to be on the same level of artistic integrity as things like Hard Boiled in terms of comics, you know. These amazing, intricate pieces of art that were just somebody expressing themselves and getting, you know what they were getting? The soul of 40K. That's what they were getting. They weren't getting, Space Marine 1.A on a bike that you can get from, your local store. It was literally, let me just vomit up this grim, dark, punk, rebellious sci-fi setting. Let me just do that. And
ironically, the artwork from AI now has got more of that vomited up, sort of slightly surreal 40K.
Well, it's kind of the thing.
That sounds really weird.
It was one of my things. I dropped it in the end, but it was something that I wanted to talk about with Horus Heresy when I said, I think Horus Heresy the Horus Heresy era looks way too much like 40K to me. Like, I want John Blanche-like designs for models. I want spiky bits even on the Imperial Space Marines. I want techno-barbarian armors and weapons where you can see how things will look in 10,000 years eventually, but they don't yet, you know?
That's part of my dislike of the Beakies, which I'm sort of growing a bit of a reputation for my dislike of the Beakies. Part of it is exactly that. It's your Mark II and 3 armor has so much more personality.
Yeah. It's stocky. You can see it's more simple. We're in a much more mass-produced time at this moment. These aren't Baroque pieces of armor. These are you have 10,000, 100,000 Marines in your Legion. You got to slap these things out. Like, you can't. Not every bit of armor is this Baroque piece that is going to be. I'd want to make the Horus Heresy visually distinct for the layperson rather than the anoraks like yourself. I mean, no offense intended.
No.
But, like, I want someone to walk past and go, that doesn't look like a normal Space Marine. What's that? Whereas now,
think of it this way,
right?
Know the
difference.
If you think of it as the Marines in that time period are being built to fight xenos who are far more capable than the pathetic remains that are left in 40K.
Yeah.
And they, at several points, take the Imperium to the brink, right? Whether it's the Rangdar or someone else. And they not only defeat those enemies, but then they turn the same weapons they defeated those enemies with on one another.
Yeah.
What does that breed? It's such an interesting setting, and then it's just like, yeah, Mark 6 power armor, go. It's just, now you just look like 40K Beaky Marines. Well, to me, it defeated the purpose of the setting, but I digress. Now, my last point, because I don't want to drag this out forever. Yeah. I wrote a little one-sentence summary, but I'll have to elaborate on. Inherited lore versus earned story. And what I mean by that is, the writers they have now, I'm not going to say they're bad writers, although at times they do questionable things, they did not earn the story. They have been handed it on a silver platter, and they are told to go and do something with it by people who have no respect for it in marketing. And because of this, it's the same downfall we see with so many other beloved franchises in media, whether it's your Star Wars, your Star Treks, your Doctor Who's, your whatever, right? If you like the new stuff, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to debate people's taste in things. But there is something to be said about, I have the rights to this because I paid for it, versus I have the rights to this because it's my intellectual design and I fucking earned it. And the problem I think lies in that is that because they haven't earned that story, to them it's just they don't. It doesn't matter what they do with it. If they think it's cool, they'll just do it. And it hasn't got, a Tolkien there guiding the story. Like, no. Very specifically, you have to use this grammar because that's the way it's done in this universe. This is the rules. This is the logic, and you can't diverge from that. That doesn't exist here. It is just the law is being used as a scapegoat for selling models, and they will snap it, break it, burn it to the ground if they think they can sell one more model by doing so. And that is a damn shame because I think they really underestimate how much of a draw the universe they've created that someone else created that they just have been given on a silver platter. They don't realize how fundamental model sales are tied to it.
Well, here's a good point, just to jump off and use what you just said there. Who was the most controversial lore guy back in the day?
Ward?
Yeah, Matt Ward, right? All of his mistakes were born of passion and love for what he was doing. All of his mistakes of sucking off the Ultramarines to building up the Grey Knights to be this amazingly huge, powerful force, that's all born out of passion, not really selling models. Selling models is in it, yeah, of course it is. But most of it is him going, look how cool this shit is, look how cool, oh my god, I get to do my own codex? Awesome! The Grey Knights are the best thing ever. Why? Because I wrote them. But anyway, look at this stuff. It's awesome. Right? It's all to do with that. I can forgive that a lot easier than I can forgive this cold-hearted, this is the best model in our current range. This is the best army in our current range. Why? Because on the front of every Space Marine box, the art that you see is Ultramarines. And we can't let them lose, or we don't respect you enough to stop. We think you'll stop buying them if they lose. This is now a Saturday morning cartoon where we're not allowed to tell you that things are a bit hard. We're not allowed to tell you that the law is this rapidly, staunch place where nothing really changes, but at the same time everything changes because we're always fighting, we're always moving on. I can forgive a mistake of passion. I can't forgive a mistake of cold-hearted cash grabbing, and that's the difference. I think back in the day, I think me and you were both lucky enough to grow up in a time of 40K where we had writers who, when they took a misstep, it was because they were just, for want of a better word, jizzing all over themselves at how cool their job was. They got to write about 40K. Do you know what I mean? I think we'd all be in the same boat as well if that was our job. Whereas, like, these days, most of the mistakes seem to come across of, this needs to look cool because we're going to sell it. This needs to look cool because we're going to push it. All of this needs to work in together because we're creating a setting to sell models. We're not creating models to show you how cool our setting is. That's the whole thing's switched around, which is natural, I suppose, in a capitalist society, but it also means that we're losing a lot of the soul of what 40K is,
It's a real shame because I think back, we were spoiled. I think back to the Alessio Cavator, days, and the way he made every one of those Chaos Gods unique in 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
And what those books were. They were fantastic. And then what comes after that in 3.5, you get that vanilla paste hack job that I think Gav Thorpe put out in an afternoon of 4th edition Chaos, where it was just... it was Black Legion, basically. And it was like you had one squad devoted to each god, and it was only for those 4 legions. So it was, if you played Alpha Legion or you played Iron Warriors, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, sorry,
and that's the same thing they've kept ever since, But they want to give every chapter their day in the sun.
They have no idea what to do with Chaos Undivided, that's why. They don't know, unless something's red, green, blue, or purple, they don't know what to do. They literally don't know.
I just call them Chaos. I call them Chaos Undecided.
Yeah, Chaos Undecided.
Because that's what they are.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with them, and they don't know who to do it with. It's like smart man wouldn't have wouldn't have had Abaddon and his silly henchman like Harkon World Claimer. He would have gone. A smart man would have said, "Let's pull out this funny little guy named Luft Huron and his Red Corsairs and put them to work."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially if they let Luft Huron fail, because let's face it, every Chaos character fails all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the pattern. Then suddenly he doesn't look so competent next to Abaddon, and you can use that as part of the power politics, where all of a sudden your campaign actually enhances the faction. Because right now, as a fan, I'm sitting here going, "How's Abaddon still in charge?"
Yeah,
because he's just useless.
Yeah. I mean, Horus gets to fail once, but Abaddon gets to fail 90,000 times before we even get into it.
The 13th Black Crusade is pure fail at this point, because people say, "Oh, but it created the Cicatrix Maledictum," and I sit here going, "But what is the lore actually bringing from that?" So, well, no, demons pop up anywhere now. So they did before. That's why the Grey Knights existed, because demon infestations could just occur. You know, you needed some way to deal with that. You know, and obviously the Auto Hereticus and demon hunters in general. It's like, so that's not a problem. Oh, well, warp travel's harder. Like, warp travel always was hard. Well, I think the light of the Astronomicon is there, but, you know.
I think what we're saying is that the Imperium shouldn't be winning. You know, the Imperium winning makes a joke of this entire thing. Like, we're not saying that, look, you know, the Imperium can't win on certain days. What we are saying is that the entire... And we're not saying that you need to be bombarded with losses, because that would be a bit tiring on the soul and reading. What we're saying is the entire atmosphere should be, we're in the not the autumn years. This is the start of winter now. We're into end times here. You know, it's called the time of ending for a reason, right? It should be, you know, the Emperor's light should be failing. The entire place should be going to shit. At the moment, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is Rebute Gilliman winning a lot and solving the galaxy's problems because we want to sell models. You know, the integrity of the setting births model success. If you want to know if that's true or not, well, look at your box that you have on your shelf. You're currently playing Warhammer 40,000 30 plus years after this silly little setting was founded somewhere in Nottingham, right? You're there now. Why? Because they made models to show how cool the setting they thought up in their own minds was. And now we've got the reverse of that. Now we're in a very cynical age where we're trying to keep this alive and say to people, look, you know, you can buy the models as much as you like. But I tend to think that the only people who really rail against Games Workshop, and there are a few, and let's be honest, I mean, I've been accused of it, you've been accused of it, you know, nearly every major YouTuber has been accused of it, where they say, you just hate Games Workshop. No, I'm far from it. I love Games Workshop. And I love Warhammer. But that doesn't mean... Like, if my brother does something stupid, I'll call him out and say, that was stupid. You shouldn't have done that, you know? And Games Workshop do that all of the time, where they cheapen their own gold mine. They've got a gold mine here of information and a setting that is utterly unique. I don't care how many people start throwing Starship Troopers and shit like that at me. I know 40K gets a lot of stuff from a lot of different places. Trust me, I'm a Berserk fan. They steal a lot, right? But there's nothing that hits the same way as 40K. There's nothing that does it. It's so British. That's the one thing that... An American couldn't make 40K. They just couldn't. It'd be too cartoony. It'd be too silly. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going to upset a lot of people. Only a dour British guy could make 40K. Somebody who's been put through the Thatcher years. Those are the people who made 40K, right?
Yeah, people who still eat like the Germans are bombing them.
Exactly, yeah. That the best meme ever. The British still eat like the Germans are flying overhead, right? It's exactly that. That's exactly what 40K is. And the more we move away from that into this Saturday morning cartoon, Rebute Gilliman, blue and gold, we win every week, but the galaxy tells us that we're not. It's just a complete... It's not a fabrication, but it's a demystification and a taking away of the soul and the mystique that is 40K. And I think that's the core message of the video, I think, that we're trying to send. Again, unifying everything together. Is that. Do you have any closing statements that you want to make?
There's the best trailer for 40K is not this new trailer. Everyone is raving about the new 10th edition trailer. Cynical me says they were always going to, no matter what was brought out.
Yeah.
The best trailer for 40K is probably Dawn of War 2, where the Marines win the fight against the Eldar. The Farseers basically says to them, you don't understand. And as he looks up, you can see like the Hive Fleet tendrils blotting out the stars above, right? That's the perfect sort of trailer for what 40K should be, not a heroic, the Marines charge into the enemy type thing. If I could have made a trailer for 40K to really, to fix this lore train, my 10th edition trailer would have finished with something similar to that shot. Just beautiful picture of a starry night sky, and then just one by one, all the stars just start blinking out until it's just dark.
That'll be... I mean, I think one regaling thing I wanted to say, the way I was taught to do intro games was to look at the... they said, what should an intro game of Warhammer 40,000 look like? And my trainer literally said, have you played Dawn of War 1? I said, yeah. He said, have you seen the opening cinematic with the Raven, the Blood Ravens fighting the Orcs? Yeah, that's what it should look like. That's what it should play like. It should play like that. Because did the Marines win? No, they all die. Exactly. But they die gloriously. It's tragic, but it's like, fuck yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're ready to play. That's what it should be. Right now, it's being treated like in Space Game of Thrones, but with its balls taken off. And that's not me. That's not 40K to me.
It's Season 8 Game of Thrones. No matter how many Dothraki die, there's always more the next episode.
Exactly, yeah.
And the Dothraki here is the Imperium.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever the Imperium are choosing to throw at the threat this time around. But I think we're done.
Although full points to them if the lion stabs Gilliman at the end of it, though.
I mean, that's not going to happen. But I would fully applaud if he just turns up and have you seen that meme so far of him waking up, Lion waking up, and the Watchers in the Dark telling him that Gilliman's been shagging Yvraine? He's like, he's been doing what with a what? Like, just Gilliman. No, yeah, just awesome. But that's it. We're done. Like, I think we've gone through all our points. So a 90-minute Mammoth. Cheers for turning up, man. It's been really, really fun. As always, we'll do this again sometime. Because
yeah, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to talk to Maka off screen just to shoot the shit for a little bit. But see you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.